Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Raw Life Health Show. And I'm so excited that many of you are enjoying these videos. And today is one of my favorite guests and a friend, and he's been on many times because his story is so inspirational. This is Nurse Tom Fisher. And say hello, Tom, to the audience.
Hey, great to be here, Paul. Thank you.
Yes, Tom is a wonderful teacher, a coach, healer, and so many other things he's going to discuss today. But I first want to get to his background. When I do raw food retreats and healing retreats, I always like to speak to people that have actually physically suffered and healed because they can connect with people on an emotional level. Tom, his life is amazing. Tom, tell everybody, briefly as you're introducing yourself, where you were before you heard about raw foods, what raw
hmm
foods did for you,
hmm
and what happened and where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So, essentially, I grew up really on a standard American diet. Lots of meat, lots of carbohydrates in the way of potatoes, desserts, candies, things like that. And you know, growing up that way, I was also very athletic too. Played basketball to the collegiate level, and you know, what a lot of people don't realize that I realized later is when you do that level of athletics, your nutritional needs are much greater. But I wasn't really supporting those nutritional needs either. And I also had worked a bit in my younger years in landscaping. So I had exposure to, different chemicals that they used in, keeping up the lawns and, Roundup, things like this. But in my later 20s, I started to get really low energy, which was odd for me because normally my energy was very good growing up and being very athletic. And with that, I saw the doctor. The doctor basically said I was a little anemic. Take some iron tablets. You're on your way. And I said, great, not really knowing any better. But I continued to kind of go downhill at that point, and my energy started to keep plummeting. I started to have discomfort, and then the discomfort turned into pain to the point where I thought I was actually maybe having some type of cardiac issue. And so I actually went to the ER to get checked out. And at the ER, they did
How old
lots
were
of.
you? How old were you at this point?
I was 29 years old.
29 years old. Okay, you went to the emergency room. Well,
Yeah, went to the ER. So they did lots of checks on me, a lot of cardiovascular tests, which were all fine. But in one of their x-rays, they saw a mass in my chest region. And then they did lots of scans, CAT scans, PET scans, gallium scans, MRIs. And they determined at that point, along with a biopsy, that I had, at that point, stage 4 lymphoma, a type called Hodgkin's disease. So, like I said, I grew up really not knowing much about nutrition, didn't know much about raw food or supplementation, lifestyle, none of that stuff. And I was trying to learn at that point, but with anyone you probably have ever interviewed in the past, when you have such a major health challenge like that, the amount of pressure on you from the medical system to do what they do, and pressure from family and friends to do what the doctors say, it's quite tremendous. If you've never been through that situation yourself. And
uh,
so,
if
go
you don't
ahead.
mind me asking, so how did they tell you this? I mean, this is serious information. How'd they tell you this? Was it a phone call? Did they call you in their office? How did they break the news to you?
It's kind of interesting that that's a question I don't think I was ever asked, but I was actually at the time working, and I got a phone call from the doctors once they got the information. It may have been a nurse, I'm not sure, but they basically told me over the phone while I was at work that, hey, by the way, you have cancer, and we're recommending this type of aggressive treatment, and we want to follow up with you as soon as
So
possible.
so your waiting to hear back the results of these scans they did to find out why you were having chest pain. And how many was it, a day later, a week later when they called you back? How long was it? Do you remember?
It probably wasn't many days. It was probably, 3, 4 days, I would
Okay.
say.
When you went to the emergency room, at that point, did they admit you at the hospital or they release you from the emergency room?
I did get admitted because they didn't really know what was going on with me, and that's when
Okay.
they started running all those
And how
tests.
long were you in the how long were you in the hospital for?
I was in the hospital for about a week to 2 weeks.
Wow, that's a pretty long time.
Yeah, it's a
Just
long
running
time because they
they're
had
running
no
all these
clue.
tests. And at
I
that
had
point,
tests
and then
and I
and what
had a biopsy as well.
okay, so
Yeah.
at that point, did anyone ever mention to you at that point while you were in the hospital the possibility of cancer?
So, after the surgery, when I was a little kinda groggy, the surgeon, having done the biopsy and a pretty, you know, uh, skilled surgeon that's done this a lot, he actually told me when I was kinda coming out of anesthesia, he's like, "It looks like lymphoma."
So
And yeah,
wow. Wow, let me get
yeah.
straight. So you went to the emergency room. This is important for everyone to say. You went to the emergency room for chest pain. They
Mhm,
couldn't figure out what was wrong. They admitted you. They ran
mhm.
a whole bunch of tests, and then they said, we're gonna do a, and when you say surgery, it means a biopsy.
A biopsy, yeah, they had to do a
From
biopsy.
where? From where was they taking a biopsy? From your heart area, your chest area?
They had to go through the sternal notch here into where the heart area is, because that's
Now,
where the mass was.
now, knowing what you know now, so they didn't know what was wrong, but they said, let's do a biopsy.
Through the scans, they had an idea that it was a type of cancer, but they didn't know because they didn't actually have a specimen of it. So they thought
Okay,
it was some type of cancer, but they weren't
so
really sure.
so you're in a hospital. So that's when you're in a hospital and they tell you it might be some type of cancer. Let's do a
Mhm.
biopsy just to make sure. So
Right.
you did they did the biopsy, and when they released you from the hospital, at that point, you weren't confirmed to have cancer, but it was something they were looking into.
It was a strong possibility, yeah. I
So when you
mean,
left there, you know it might have been. Okay, so
yeah.
they said, "We'll call you back in a couple of days, the results." Now,
Mhm.
at that point, after they did the biopsy, what else? I mean, did the pain stop at that point that they let you go, or was it something that they, like, why'd they keep it 2 weeks? And then did they do the biopsy and say, "We got the biopsy, you can go now"? What made them say, "Okay, now you can leave"?
Yeah, well, it was basically where they had all the information that they felt to gather a diagnosis. So that's why I was released. Um, I think I still had some of the discomfort, but it may have not has been as bad as it was. Not that they gave me any treatment or anything, but I could at least sleep a little bit.
Okay, so when you leave and for a couple of days you're waiting for the answer, how were you thinking when you left the hospital? Were you thinking like, "Oh, it's not really cancer, they're wrong," or were you thinking this is cancer? Like, what was your thinking when you were leaving the hospital?
I think because of my young age and my background and athleticism, I didn't feel that I could be affected by anything. So I personally didn't think I had anything really going on, although they were, pretty convinced there was something going on pretty major. But I was hopeful there it wasn't, you know.
Okay. And again, everybody that's watching, cancer doesn't happen overnight. This has been building up in his body for a long time. And what he does now, and what I help people do is try to read your body and understand your body. So and take proactive measures to read what's going on in your body. So you don't wake up one day with stage 4 cancer. You catch it early and so on. So then you go to your job. A couple of days later, you get a phone call and they confirm now it wasn't the first time you heard cancer. They confirm we did the test. It is cancer.
Yeah, and they confirmed the type, the actual
Right.
type from the biopsy.
And that type was, say that again.
It was, Hodgkin's disease, stage 4B, B meaning with symptoms. I had the pain.
So stage 4. Now most people stage 4 cancer. Correct me if I'm wrong, because you're a professional nurse. They give you in a certain amount of time when you have stage 4. Is that correct or incorrect?
They sometimes the doctors will give you percentages of time that you may live, or time that you might potentially, or percentages you may survive.
Okay,
My
did they give you any of that over the phone at that point?
Not over the phone, but, with the oncologist when I was, working with them in conventional treatments, they had said I probably had about a 40% chance of a 5-year survival rate.
Okay, well, 5 years is quite common for most
Mhm.
prognosis. I mean, I've heard stories them say, "Oh, you got 6 months," but mostly
Yeah.
5 years is what people usually say. Okay, so you get the phone call, you hang up the phone. What do you do? Do you go back to work or do you go, I gotta leave, and then you go straight to that doctor's office? What do you do at that point?
It's interesting. I was pretty upset, as you might, understand, and, pretty stressed out, and one of my, colleagues at the time kinda asked me, "Hey, what's going on?" And I told him what I had in the call, and he's just like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, that's no big deal, that's so easily treatable." And I'm like, it was just, it kinda blew my mind that he kind of like, downplayed, this major diagnosis that I just got. I was
Now,
like, "Wow, this is
wh-
crazy."
what was your job at the time that you were at?
I was working back then in IT.
Okay, so you're working
Yeah,
in computers and stuff. So one of your
yeah.
colleagues doesn't make big of it. Do you think he was just trying to calm you down, or you think he sincerely thought it wasn't a major deal?
I think, he just didn't really know. I think he just didn't have much of an understanding. He thought he did, and maybe he thought he was, doing something to be nice for me, but I think he just didn't have the knowledge.
So did you leave work early that day and come home and like what'd you
Uh,
do?
I don't even think I left early. I don't even think
So
I actually worked through the whole treatment that I had,
yeah,
which was a mistake, in retrospect.
well, for some people, it takes people's mind off what they're going through, so you don't know. But
Mhm.
so at that point, how long before you actually was in the doctor's office hearing what you should be doing?
Probably as soon as the following week, I would imagine.
All right, and
Yeah.
tell us what they suggested. Did they suggest chemo, surgery? What they suggest?
So at that point, because it was a lymphoma, they recommended a chemotherapy called ABVD, which would be a course of 6 months and a treatment every 2 weeks, is
Now,
what the treatment was.
was that through an IV? Was that through pills? How was that?
Yeah, that was IV, so I had to go there. I was being treated at, Dana-Farber, which is a pretty well-known, uh, medical clinic for cancer specifically
Where was that located?
in, Boston.
Okay, and so you were living in that area at the time?
Yeah, I was up
Okay.
there.
So I know, from what I understand, the chemo, you sit there for many hours getting this IV inside you. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah, it can go several hours. They have to sometimes run it slow, because it can affect the veins, obviously, and, damage them, and, damage other areas.
How many days a week were you doing that for the 6 months?
I was doing it, 1 day a week, every 2 weeks.
And when you're sitting in that chair getting this stuff inside you, what's
Mhm.
going on in your mind?
It's kind of interesting. In the beginning, I kinda thought, like, because I felt like nothing could affect me with, my years of, working out and athleticism. I thought, "Ah, this is not gonna be a big deal. I can handle this." And probably after the 2nd or 3rd treatment, it was really kicking my butt, you know? And, the my energy went it really bottomed out. Obviously my hair fell out of my eyebrows, my eyelashes as well during the time. I was having, some digestive issues, nausea. I had a lot of brain fog as well, especially towards the ending of the treatment, something they call chemo brain. I had a hard time remembering stuff during that time.
So the way you were feeling, besides the physical symptoms, was it like right after you left, or was it throughout the whole time?
It was normally during, and then a couple days after. I normally felt pretty bad, but towards the end of the treatment, I sometimes felt off for like a whole week or so, you know?
And now you were saying you made a mistake by working at that point.
Yeah.
Why'd you say that? Do you think you should have been home resting, or why'd you say
Yeah,
it's a mistake?
in retrospect, obviously there's bills to be paid, and I did have to pay bills. I was the breadwinner at that point, and but if I had the means to not work, I wouldn't work, so that I could focus solely on my healing and do other things as well, to support my healing process.
So now at this point, 29 years old, you're working in IT, and we fast forward to now where you're actually a nurse helping people in the situation you were in. What was that moment that you realized, hey, this isn't the way I want to go, or this isn't working? I need to change. Because did it work? Did How long did you do the chemo for, and did it accomplish? Did it just
I did
add?
it
Go ahead.
Did it for 6 months. During that time, I was adding in things to support myself. I was adding in certain supplements. I was adding in, changing my diet to the best I could with my knowledge then, going more plant-based. And, I was using some different techniques to try to reduce my stress, like meditation. And um, the chemo did help to knock back the cancer. I wasn't out of the woods, and that's where I felt, I had to really take my health into my own hands. And I during that time and after, I was doing a tremendous amount of research to find out what I could do to help myself in nutrition, in lifestyle, supplementation, things like that, or other adjunct therapies.
Okay, so after the chemo, did it go down to stage 3, or was it still at stage 4?
No, it's weird with cancer. They have a staging process, but then they just kind of talk about how the cancer's been reduced. They didn't really tell me as far as like a reduction in stage per se. They just said that, a lot of the cancers has been, knocked back or, you know, reduced from the chemo.
And at that point, even though you started doing your own research about diet and supplements and so on, did anyone recommend any nutritional tips to you and all the medical doctors you went to? Did anyone say, well, you should cut this out of your diet or add this at that point?
Well, I was doing a lot of research then. So I was asking my oncologist, who was a specialist in Hodgkin's disease at Dana Farber, and I said, "Is there anything that I need to stop eating or anything I should do?" He's like, "No, just eat whatever you want." And, I even asked him because back then I would have, a glass of beer or wine. I said, "Is it okay? Can I continue drinking alcohol?" And he said, "Well, don't do that, but only because I asked him. He didn't tell me not to otherwise. So that was really my only thing said not to do by the doctor is not to drink alcohol.
So, so you're doing your own research and so on.
Hmm.
And then what happens there? You went on mostly plant-based diet or a lot of plant-based foods.
Yeah.
What was the shift? When did you realize that this is the right way to go? And
Yeah, well, I think the shift was, as I kept doing more and more research, um, you know, I kept seeing research that showed, vegan helping cancer, vegan diet. Then, I was starting to learn a bit about raw, but only through certain places, because I wouldn't say there was a ton of research that I found on that specifically at that time. But I start seeing anecdotal stories of people healing using raw foods. I started meeting people that had, um, say, stores that sold raw food, and people that had seen people recovering from different things. And I basically felt literally while I was looking at all this research online, I felt like I was being slapped in the face. Like, why are you not, vegan? Why are you not going more raw? Because this is really what the evidence and what the research is showing is going to help you, you know? And that's where a major shift started to happen, and I started to really start adding in a lot more raw foods into my diet, and that started to become, more and more refined over the years as I started to learn more. Maybe not years, maybe over the months, I should say, as I started to learn more and do more research on that, and adding in supplements to support my immune system. Some of that, referred by my sister. My sister was a lot more into health back then than I was. And so she was giving me some tips of what to do and, how to change things. And, I saw, I actually wanted to go through the treatment naturally. I wanted to do it by diet. I wanted to use supplements, and I had learned about a tea that anecdotally someone with Hodgkin's had beat cancer naturally with Essiac tea, along with some supplements and cleaning up their diet. But they had stage 2 Hodgkin's, not stage 4. But like I said, it's a tremendous amount of pressure on the person to do conventional therapy.
So when and how did you find out you were declared cancer free?
It was about a year after, the chemo and things. You do scans afterwards, and so they would normally do a PET scan on me to assess things, and about a year after, they basically said they couldn't find any remnants of cancer in my body, and that's after I'd done a lot of work to change my lifestyle, my diet, going more raw, using supplements, using exercise. And it took me about a year to feel normal after the chemotherapy.
So you did chemo for 6 months.
Hmm.
Then for another 6 months, you still felt the effects of the chemo. But after a year of doing the chemo, you got declared cancer free. Do you think, what part of the chemo do you think helped you being declared cancer free? Do you think it had part of it, or do you think it was strictly all the extra stuff that you were doing?
Well, I do think that the chemo did help in a way to knock back the cancer. I mean, in a way, um, certain types of cancer uh, do better with some of the conventional therapies, I guess you could say. For example, some lymphomas, some myeloma, testicular cancer. These sometimes respond, at least in a reduction, with chemotherapy. A lot of the solid tumors don't necessarily respond that well to cancer. And one of the things I always tell people is, if you're looking at doing a conventional therapy, ask for the absolute statistics on survival, 5-year survival rate, because this is very important. They may give you relative statistics, which aren't quite as accurate. And that way you'll have a better understanding is if this therapy is going to be supportive for you or not so supportive.
Okay. So when somebody works with you, because this is what you do now, you help people in this situation, and I think there's no better person to go to than somebody who's been through it, because like I said, they understand the emotional and mental aspect of it. So when somebody works with you, and they're confused if they should do the chemo and stuff, are you completely closed to the chemo, or based on their situation, do you actually recommend it in some cases?
Well, it's always, I let it to be an individual process. So if that person really believes chemo will help them, and I'm not going to talk them out of it. It's a personal decision. I give them information based on what I know, based on what's the newest thing in the way of research. But one thing to understand, there was a meta-analysis study done by two oncological researchers out of Australia, and they looked at all cancers combined, and they looked at statistical data. By the way, meta-analysis is the creme de la creme of research. I mean, these are major studies. They looked at all cancers, and they looked at the effectiveness of chemo, and they looked at it specifically in different countries. And in the United States, when you look at all chemotherapy, it's 2% effective in 5-year survival rate for all cancers. So that's why people have to really look outside, in my opinion, of only medical options because they are quite limited. There's only 3 things that an oncologist can do. They can recommend chemo, they can refer you to radiology, or they can refer you to surgery. That's it, 3. It's a lot of things in the natural world that you can do that can help you in your recovery. And I've seen it with thousands of people that I've worked with that have had various types of cancer.
So you were working in IT at the time. So how did you become a nurse, and how did you find out about raw food and end up at this place called the Hippocrates Health Institute? Take us on that path of how you went from IT to a nurse to Hippocrates.
So that was an interesting
'Cause
path.
I believe I
Yeah.
met you during this process.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
in there, I probably met you at a lecture somewhere, I think
Yes.
first, you know,
So so
back when you were out and about.
take us on the process of how you did that.
Yeah, so essentially, you know, during the IT boom, forget the exact year that happened, but there was tons of layoffs in IT. I was one of those. And I didn't have a ton of experience in IT, so it was extremely hard for me to find another job. And you know, at that time, you know, I used to work in medical field in physical therapy as an aide or an assistant, and I really liked working with people and helping people. Um, and so my mom thought, you know, nursing would probably be a good avenue for me because at that time, after I had the treatment, I was doing a lot of research. I was helping myself at that time, but a lot of people started to learn what I was doing, and they started to just contact me through friends or family, and they would ask my advice on things when they had cancer. And I would try to help them the best that I could. I did a lot of health consults, and it sort of, you know, transpired that this was kind of the way I wanted to go. And so I got out of that, and then, you know, I strongly considered the nursing, and I started doing nursing school. While I was in school, I worked 3 jobs as well. It was a very busy time. And nursing school was a little painful for me because a lot of what they talked about, I knew at least in a nutritional sense, was incorrect. They used to talk a lot about better life through chemistry, chemistry meaning medicine. And I knew, you know, medicines had lots of side effects, and you know, there's been a lot of tragic issues with different types of medicine. You know, for example, Vioxx medicine, you know, unfortunately killed about 55,000 people. So there was a lot of issues that I had in that, and I knew I wanted to work in a more natural area of nursing. And so when I finished nursing school, I worked for a short stint in the hospitals, medical surgical oncology unit. And essentially, you know, I work with people that I rarely saw get better. I would work with people that I would see come back to the hospital, normally getting worse and not improving. And I felt that it was a system that was highly damaged and had a lot of issues, a lot of holes. And I didn't want to continue to be in that type of environment. And so during a travel nurse assignment I did in Naples, the Hippocrates Health Institute had a position open as a nurse. I had gone there prior to that and did their health educator program, which was 9 weeks. That was one place where I had you lecture as well when I was a student there. And it looked like a place that I thought I would fit in because they use lifestyle, they use diet, they use other means to help people in their healing. And so I had a couple interviews once I got in and got the position. Work there, had become someone that does their health consults with people that come in from around the world. I also did health lectures on different topics. I was involved in some of the research that they did too. And I became the manager and I headed the medical team for many years, and I was there for a good decade. And then COVID hit, and so they had some downturn there, and now I've been doing more of my own consulting work. But there, I saw lots and lots and lots of people with different types of cancer, and there was people there. I mean, literally, were told to go to hospice. I saw people that were told to go to hospice recover. And I'm not going to say that that was in every case, but I did see a lot of people that were given no hope. And I've seen a lot of people that either beat it, fully reversed, or extended their life much longer than they were told in the medical community in,
Wow.
in implementing the raw and living foods along with supplementation, mind, body, all that good stuff.
It's very touching what you're saying because I was diagnosed with an illness that the docs had no cure for, ulcerative
Mhm.
colitis and Crohn's disease. And I ended up at Hippocrates Health Institute, and I ran into Brian Clement at a health food store. And I
Mhm.
just said, let me check this out. And my doctor, I called up in New York, and they were like, this isn't going to help you. It's bad for you. And
Right,
I
right.
changed, which in fact, she had a degree because raw food isn't the best for somebody, a whole
Mm,
food. I mean, in blended form,
yeah.
it's great. But point being, I did the Hippocrates program. I got better,
Mhm.
quit my job and started writing books and teaching people about this lifestyle. So when I'm going to tell you this, folks, right now. I know most of you watching are into health or raw food diet and nutrition, but we know somebody is not. And if somebody has been diagnosed with an illness, and sadly, many people are getting diagnosed with cancer, this is the type of person I want you to speak to. This is why I have him as a guest on this show. And I'm going to put his contact information below. I had another guest on the other day. He's another person. These are the people that is your best chance of of getting a much better outcome than what the doctors are promising you. And Tom knows from experience. Uh, please, I'm pleading with you to however you can to get that person, or maybe it is yourself, because even if you're eating raw, you can still get cancer. Whatever the case is, I have loved ones, Tom, that have cancer, close ones
Mhm.
to me,
Mhm.
very close family members that have cancer. I haven't seen one of them in years. She has stage 4 cancer. She came down to visit me, and knowing she's not going to eat raw food, I tried to take her to Chipotle. I said, let's at least get a meal, but she didn't eat any healthy. She goes, no,
Yeah.
all I want to do is go to McDonald's and get ice cream. I
Oh,
love
wow.
their ice cream. I love their ice cream.
Yeah.
And never taken any suggestions from me. So I understand, folks that are watching, that there are some people that you love that just aren't going to do anything. But
Mhm.
if somebody asked you, or if anyone's open to anything, if they have cancer or other diseases, please look at the number I'm going to put below, Tom's number, and have them contact him. He can help them with this information he's learned. You heard his story. Stage 4 cancer, most people would give up. Most people do give up.
Mhm.
And your story's amazing. Your story's amazing.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
It's so important. My loved ones, they won't listen. And for those of you that are watching, I understand when that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well,
It's
Paul,
hard. Yeah.
it's interesting because the same thing that's happening to you now happened to me with my dad. Back when I had finished, the health educator and had been educating myself beyond that, I really tried to get him to start, changing his nutrition, adding in supplements. I couldn't get him to take a supplement. I mean, he would do whatever the doctor said, and that was
Yeah.
not a good scene. Um, and what was really the most egregious part of it was the reason he was there anyway was because a doctor didn't get back to him with a biopsy result from a skin exam, which my dad was old school. He felt no news is good news from the doctor. Well, no news meant that they were incompetent. It did not tell him that that was cancer they took from him, and it had metastasized over the time that he had had that done. And yet he still went, with conventional medicine, which did not help him.
It's like if somebody would have told you, "Oh, you're fine. You don't have cancer," and you would have went thinking you were fine, where this is growing inside you. So they did
Yeah.
him a disservice by not telling him, whether it was by accident or on purpose. And
Yep.
you'd figure that'd be his wake up call to say, "Hey, I'm not listening to these guys. Look what
Yeah.
situation they helped me get into." But he didn't.
Mm.
He didn't get it,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
his own son, here is teaching this, overcomes cancer, and he's not listening to you.
I tried. I tried just like you try. It was sometimes you have to let people go through their path.
Yeah. So how amazing do you feel on a personal level that not only have you conquered this, but you're living a lifestyle? I mean, I know there are certain diseases that we don't have control over, the air we breathe and so on in certain situations, but knowing that you're putting in your body the best things you could possibly put in your body for your best chance of survival, that you have this knowledge. How does that make you feel?
Feel great. My energy's good. I don't need caffeine when I get up in the morning. I don't need other stimulants to keep me going through the day. My energy's good, and feel good. I don't have any discomfort in my body. My thinking, I believe, is only improved over the years. And so, I can't complain. Yeah.
Somebody might be watching this and thinking, how could somebody that eats a healthy diet or a raw food diet get cancer? And just because the timing of this, I'm going to share something that's just changed my life. And I knew so long, but I didn't do. And you could attest to this, Tom, I'm sure. So
Mhm.
here I am, a health teacher, teaching and having people like you on for years, doing the extreme to be as healthy as possible, my diet, to my exercise and everything else. But there's one thing I was doing that was very unhealthy. I knew it was unhealthy, but for years I did it. And it was only a short while ago where I changed, and I feel like this is the missing thing, but I feel too many people fall for this. So I want to mention this with you. So for years, I had to be up early in the morning. And I think I always say the most important part of health and healing is the quality of your sleep, or at least it's a sign or a testament to your health. And what I would do is cut off my sleep with an alarm clock every day. And it's such a terrible habit, but I did it for years. And just
Mhm.
recently, I decided I am not going to use an alarm clock anymore. I'll either get to sleep earlier. There's nothing more important, no appointment that's more important than me doing this.
Mhm.
How like the simple thing that people don't realize how dangerous it is to cut off their sleep every day with an alarm on a regular basis, on a daily basis. What do you
Yeah.
say about that?
Not getting a proper sleep is huge. I mean, from some of the research I've seen, sleep during sleep is about 70% of your healing. A lot of people miss some of the key times of healing between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. A lot of people are going to sleep too late. When you start to stay up around 11:30, your adrenal glands get a second wind, which increases your cortisol and you feel like you have more energy. But what you're doing is you're further stressing your body. A lot of people, unfortunately, on devices at night, phones and computers and stuff, all this blue light is depleting their melatonin, a factor not only for sleep, but it's a great antioxidant to keep you looking younger. And by the way, it's tremendously anti-cancer as well. And a lot of us deplete that just through how we live. So sleep's critical. Sleep's critical. Sleep's actually one way that I overcame adrenal fatigue. I started to go to bed earlier. One of the big keys to overcoming that.
Such an important thing, and I could tell you, so there was one day a week that I would get enough sleep. On Saturday morning, I would sleep in, and the rest of the week, I would just get up with an alarm. So recently, I want to, how much sleep do I really need? And the only way to find out is to sleep and find out on a regular basis, not just one day a week. And it's
Mm,
been very interesting. And I know, like last night, I went to sleep much later than I like to, but I know I didn't get up with alarm tonight, this morning, and I slept where normally I would have cut my sleep off maybe 3 or 4 hours early to do my daily
mm,
task. and I
Yeah.
got 3 or 4 extra hours of healing time by staying in bed. And I made a video about this recently, and people are saying, "Oh, my poor husband has to get up for work early in the morning." Go to sleep earlier. Don't
Hmm.
there's no poor husband, go to sleep earlier. It's not that complicated, but it's this little simple thing that these things, Tom, tell me if I'm correct or wrong. These are the things that build up in the body and contribute tremendously to disease, right?
Yeah, if you chronically are not getting enough sleep, this has been shown by research out of University of Minnesota that essentially it's cumulative. It's an accumulative effect on the body and can start to affect our immunity, affect how we digest, how we heal. It's a critical component.
Absolutely. Well, Tom,
Yeah.
your information has been amazing. And, everyone contact Tom. He does personal coaching and consultations. His contact information is below. But tell us, Tom, what are you working on now? Any new projects or anything? Or, what can you offer people if they contact you? Uh,
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yeah, so I do a few things. I mean, I've been trying to work on some online education. I was actually developing a program to help people that have had long COVID or other issues with that. I've been doing a lot of research into that. So there's a lot of things that can help people that have been affected by that. I do also different health retreats as well. So people have health retreats and they need a speaker or someone that will do also speaking and health consults during an event. I do that as well. And then I also do personal health consults. And with that, I create a plan of action for people. I look at the food, the diet, look at if they need any targeted nutrients. I look at lifestyle. I look at if there's certain testing they need, and also if they need any adjunct therapy or things that may be a little bit more stronger to support them in whatever they're going through.
Okay, okay. And is the best place to contact you? I know you don't have a website yet; it's in the process. But is your phone number below, or is it email? What's the best way people get in
Uh,
touch with you?
Probably now email would be best. I mean, they could always text me too, but yeah, email I check daily and then get back to people with that.
Okay, and you're available, and this is what you do is to work with people. So people should feel free contacting you to schedule an appointment with you and find out how you can work along with them, right?
Yeah, I have over, 15,000 clinical hours of working with people one-on-one with different health challenges. And I work with people with almost every type of condition and disorder over those years because a lot of people that see me don't get help, unfortunately, from standard or allopathic medicine. And sometimes they come to me after that's failed as well. And so I'm very well versed in many different issues, health-wise, disease processes.
Okay, okay, everybody. So contact Tom. Tom, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here today. And
Yep.
your information is so great. I love having you as a guest here. And keep doing the great work you're doing.
Appreciate you, Paul. You as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life Health Show. Nature's wealth, good for your health. This is the Raw Life.